The Oscars have had their fun, so you know what time it is. It is time, once again, for the real Best Pictures. Otherwise known as just, the movies I like the most. So let's jump into it. First up is Zootopia 2. I went back and forth for a long while on what film to put here in this 10th place. Both K-pop Demon Hunters and the highest grossing film of the year, Neja, were contenders for a while. I loved the style of both K-pop and Neja, especially the latter for the fluid action scenes. But I do have to be honest here that Zootopia 2 is probably my favorite animated movie from this year. And from the box office, I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in that. It's rare that a movie is able to match or even live up to the original, but Zootopia 2 manages to do both. In some ways, I can see how people can complain how it is just more of the same. And to that, I say, so what? When someone gives me a delicious slice of chocolate cake, I really don't complain when they pass me a second. Zootopia maintains the charm and brilliant chemistry of the two main leads as their relationship from the previous film is allowed to grow in new directions, creating new friction while never losing that heartbeat. The two lead voice combo of Jennifer Goodwin and Jason Bateman really is a killer matchup. In fact, all the voice acting here is top notch, and more than anything else, maybe the real star of the show. That's not to write off the really, flashy and good visual effects either. Once again, Nick and Hops are on the trail of another mystery that, much like the first, serves mostly as a framing device to continue themes of racial tension, prejudice, and perhaps, with a bit more subtle of a touch, it tackles the core themes of cultural displacement and gentrification. There are especially strong parallels back to the displacement of the Native Americans within the United States. And yes, these are big ideas that will be lost on the younger kids. But fear not, because there is plenty of comedy here, bright lights, and just animal puns to keep the young ones entertained. In other words, this is kind of the perfect family film. Something more deep and interesting for the parents, and simple surface-level entertainment for, of course, the little ones. Is it really that much of a surprise that this became the highest-grossing film of the year domestically, and the highest-grossing movie internationally in China? This is a rare instance of a great sequel, and I'd go a step further and say this is possibly, the best sequel ever produced from Disney Animation Pictures. Not that that's really all that high of a bar. I mean, there's not a whole lot of good sequels from them. Although, Rescuers Down Under, I will still go to bat for that. Anyways, I can't wait to see what directors Jared Bush and Brian Howard are going to do for the inevitable third film, because it is coming, and frankly, for once, I'm actually looking forward to another sequel from them. Number 9, I'm Still Here. Now, wait a darn minute. Hold the phone, you may be saying. Isn't this from 2024? Well, yes it is, my, calendar proficient viewers, people who can read release dates. However, it premiered in Brazil in November of 2024, but it would not arrive in the United States until January of 2025, but then wouldn't even be available for wider audiences until February. Seeing as I live in the US and don't have access to the film until 2025, I'm going to go ahead and include it into this year. I'm Still Here was easily the most recommended movie to me by my viewers, often used as a counterpoint to the terrible disaster that was Emilia Perez. Where one was a complete act of cultural dishonesty, a movie made by a French director about Mexico but shot entirely in Paris, and featuring the most disingenuous interpretation of the LGBTQ movement, I'm Still Here is a movie wrapped in authenticity and honesty. A brutal and gut-wrenching portrait of a specific point in their history as a country. It's a deeply personal story that covers a wife whose husband is taken during the military dictatorship and just sort of vanishes. This leaves her to wander through life wondering what happened to him, searching for answers, and always looking for closure that seems to elude her. The story is grounded in a very real and visceral performance from Fernanda Torres. And it's this that turns what could have been a plot-driven film into a more quiet character piece that focuses in on how the individuals were affected during this time. It's based on a true story, written by the son, and turned into a film by a Brazilian native. This is the sort of film fully deserving of the title of Best International Film. It also holds a very special place in my heart for upsetting one of the worst villains in Oscar history. It would become the first major nomination for Brazil at the Oscars, and their first win. And frankly, I couldn't be happier for them. This year, they're back again with The Secret Agent, so they are on certainly a hot streak here. Number 8, No Other Choice. This is another movie that just got completely kneecapped by distribution. Once again, just like with Sing Sing last year, I was forced to drive 2 hours to find it. No Other Choice got completely locked out of the Oscars this year with 0 nominations, And 0 wins, I guess, because of course it's not nominated, so go figure. It's part of an unfortunate trend this year for Asian cinema. Ne Zha 2 also failed to score a nomination for Best Animated Picture. But that wound may have been more self-inflicted, given the studio completely neglected to even submit the film to the Academy. This one, however, it's all on the Academy, okay? It's their fault. This is not the first time around the block for director Park Chan-wook. His masterpiece Oldboy also failed to get any Academy attention, despite being one of the best films of the 2000s. It's also not the second time for this director, because his other masterpiece, Decision to Leave, was likewise ignored. This makes No Other Choice the 3rd time the director has been ignored by the Academy. In the words of George Bush,
"Fool me once, shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again."
The reason this one really hurts is because this would have been a good time to shine a light on his work and give it the attention it deserves. Instead, it is once again up to little YouTubers such as myself with a tiny 50K channel. I guess you could help me make it bigger if you like. Just subscribe down below.
That's what my mom is always saying. I just never actually believed her.
No Other Choice is a black comedy that is as really dark as you can get. It follows a high-paid white-collar middle manager who loses his job and is on the verge of losing his upper-class lifestyle. When he fails to make a dent with his application for other jobs, he decides it's much easier to just kill all the other applicants. This is as absurd of a concept as you can get, but the film rides the line between legitimately funny scenes, tension, and some horrific imagery. All of it works because it connects back to the frustrations within the modern-day hiring process. Most of us, have been there. A digital, faceless application process where robots and algorithms get to decide who gets past the slush pile, without even the courtesy of a thank you note after it all. This movie is an outlet for those frustrations, but expanded to just this farcical scale. An absurd and humorous take on real anxieties that are likely to grow all the worse with our human applications now having to compete with AI, robots, and just old-fashioned automation. Robots hiring robots. What is the world coming to? We watch as the lead goes from middle manager with unmovable values to manslaughter to just incompetent murderer to okay assassin. Pair all of this absurdity with some slick cinematography and a killer performance from Lee Byung-hun, and you've got a combination completely undeserving of being ignored by the US audiences. Find it and seek it out. Number 7, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. There are countless adaptations of Frankenstein, too many to count. The first one was all the way back in 1910, produced by Thomas Edison, and the most famous one is from Universal in 1931. There have been half a dozen just in my lifetime, and we just had a new one a week ago. That's not a joke, okay? And I'll be so happy when I don't have to see those trailers anymore. I mock that final line of that trailer every time I see it.
What's my name? I can't remember.
Some may find this version of the story to be covered ground that is too well trodden, that it's just been mined down to nothing but, bedrock. Yet never underestimate a master auteur. If there's one thing that Del Toro excels at, it is making fairy tales for adults, whether that be Pan's Labyrinth, Shape of Water, or even the painfully underrated Nightmare Alley. Make no mistake, this is a story for adults, complete with swearing, sex, blood, and guts. Del Toro is a man who's gotten the art of the modern parable down to just this twisted science, all set against a backdrop of his own very distinct production design. After Pinocchio, this is another winning retelling, and Del Toro is quickly establishing how to do a remake and make it really stand out and feel personal. It is because of the man behind the camera that Frankenstein feels so fresh, yet still familiar. While drenched in the stylized supernatural, it remains grounded in two fantastic lead performances. Both Oscar Isaac and Jacob Elordi deliver on two wildly different ends of the spectrum. Frankenstein, the man, he's an obsessive creator who, despite his hatred for his father, finds himself becoming him, constantly seeking perfection in his creations, and just disillusionment when they don't meet his expectations, just like how his own father treated him. The monster inherits the role of the bitter son, looking to hurt his father back for the pain inflicted on him. It is a story about generational abuse passed on and on in a never-ending cycle. This allows the interpretation of the monster to become something true and grounded, not some sort of misunderstood villain, but a villain of choice, one of rage and revenge, yet still sympathetic in his own way. We understand how he arrived in that place. This, for me, is what makes this new version of Frankenstein really click. Character and artistic vision coming together as one. Number 6, Hamnet. This film had a unique journey on making it to this list. When I first saw this movie, I was a little more split on it. I always had some complaints with the structural pacing of Chloe Zhao's films, and I really did feel it here too. I felt it was meandering too much in the beginning with this sort of, okay romance before finding its footing in the second half. Yet, as I've said time and time again, endings are very important to me. I'd rather take a movie with a weaker first half and strong second half than the reverse. This especially holds true for Hamnet, because it easily has one of the best third acts of any film this year. If this is all sounding like weak praise for my number 6, well, let me tell you, it took me by surprise as well. Yet something happened after my first viewing. I found myself thinking about this film days later, weeks later, months later, my mind drifting back to it. Why did this ending hit so hard? So I decided to give it a second chance and saw it again. This time, I gained more appreciation for how the narrative points all neatly tied up in the end, and how the second half wouldn't be nearly as impactful without the time and slow burn of that opening. This is a movie that is like fine wine. Even with one viewing, it will sit with you. A movie not really about Shakespeare at all, but rooted in a critical eye for his art. The movie is far more about his wife Agnes, a character brought to life with one of the best performances of the year from Jessie Buckley. It is a movie that can be deeply sad, but also triumphant from how it rises above that tragedy, and how some of the greatest works can be rooted in emotional truth that can span generations. This is, in my opinion, Chloe Zhao's best movie yet, and the perfect redemption after the much maligned Eternals. Personally, I'm kind of happy her Marvel outing failed, because it would have been a shame to lose this director to the studio blockbuster machine when she has such a talent for these smaller character pieces. Here she proves she was no one-hit wonder with Nomadland, and I can't wait to see what she brings us next. Number 5, Wake Up Dead Man. What can I say? Rian Johnson knows how to write and direct a good whodunit. In fact, I may go one step further and say he may now rank among the finest mystery writers with his easy, laid-back adoption of just Agatha Christie's lockroom style. After all, Christie and her books, such as The Oriental Express, are such a core inspiration that one might think that Johnson needs to be sending royalty checks to her estate. I am kidding here. Never does the Knives Out franchise feel like cheap imitation, especially not with Johnson's grasp on the visual craft as a main mixing point for the mystery. It's also combining it with just the right blend of comedy and an all-star killer cast. Strangely, these films almost harken back to the old studio system that leaned into audiences turning up for the actors rather than pre-existing characters or known properties. What people were really after were the characters, and Johnson, he's bringing them here in spades. This is what makes the Knives Out franchise work. Daniel Craig is the grounding figure, and this may be his best role outside of James Bond. Blanc is ludicrous with his foghorn leghorn accent, but captivating in his outlandish detective wizardry. And here he's actually given a more personal struggle to deal with, one that is a crisis of faith. Now, a faith that's more based in himself, it's more self-evaluation rather than in God. But it does tie it back to religion in a neat way. Faith is the core theme that runs through the entire film, as the movie constantly brings it back to what makes some religious communities toxic and bitter, and what makes others a positive, healthy place of healing and spirituality. What makes something a good flock, and what makes others threatened by wolves in sheep's clothing. This is a dividing line that challenges both Blanc and the new lead, played by Josh O'Connor. The mystery itself also doesn't disappoint, with plenty of twists that never feel cheap. I consider all the Knives Out films to be great, and this movie may have put the trilogy up there with some of the best of the best. A consistently great trilogy where every movie is worth watching. Number 4, One Battle After Another. I already did an entire video on this film, why it's great, why it's worthy of the title of Best Picture. Anyways, you can check out the nearly 20-minute video for my detailed thoughts. I'll keep it brief here. Paul Thomas Anderson is an amazing director, but his movies don't always connect with me. For every There Will Be Blood, there is a Licorice Pizza. High highs, followed by periods of just self-indulgence and it's fine. So I do find it to be a breath of fresh air that one battle after another is lacking any self-seriousness. Though framed as a satire, and sure to brew a bunch of heated political discussions, at the core, the movie is really about a washed-up revolutionary, a pothead father, long out of his prime, just trying to save his daughter. It's a story relatively simple and easy to connect to, yet with plenty of layers to peel back if you want to look for them. At the end of the day, it really is as simple as this. I love the great performances, the unique, suspenseful set pieces, the cinematography, the killer car chase that highlighted line of sight over explosions, and the commentary on the absurdity of the rebellious spirit. This is a movie about how rebellions live, die, and repeat. Again, check out my video if you would like to hear more about what I'm talking about. It is a movie that looks and feels crafted by a pro in his prime, taking inspiration from some of my other favorite filmmakers like the Coen brothers, but not imitating or beholden to their style. It is a movie nearly 3 hours long, yet the time blows by when watching it. It has a nefarious villain, morally gray protagonist, a damsel in distress, yet not without her own agency, and, more than anything, a satisfying through line. This is what film was made for. Number 3, Sinners. What can be said about Sinners that hasn't already been said? In my brief review earlier this year, I called this movie something that you may have seen Spielberg make in his heyday, not in style or tone, but more so in how it's a B-movie concept, but given A-movie talent and cast. Schlock cinema that's elevated by those in front and behind the camera. This could have been a simple locked room survival flick, where our heroes arrive at a bar and attempt to survive some sort of supernatural monster that wants to eat their face off. That's really, when you boil it down, not far off from what it actually is. And we've certainly seen that before. Almost the exact same concept, in fact. Mostly I'm thinking of Dusk to Dawn. What elevates this vampire flick is it combines those accessible general audience elements of a creature feature with more authentic period piece drama. It has fantastic performances, mixes in a genuine love for music, and tops it all off with a hard-hitting theme of the loss of identity to cultural assimilation. This was a massive swing for a studio. You do have to give them a little bit of credit. They agreed to fund a creative and give him total ownership over the material, and gave it just the right amount of marketing. Fortunately, the audience was ready to come out and embrace it, turning Sinners into one of the biggest hits of the year, and breaking the Oscars record for the most nominated film. A record probably no one ever predicted that this would be the movie to crack it. This is genre filmmaking at its finest. Give the people what they want. It mixes what people actually want to see. Vampire mayhem, satisfying inter-character relationships, 2 Michael B. Jordans, and it hides any pretentious art house sensibilities under a bunch of blood and guts. It creates a movie that works perfectly kind of for everyone. Well, unless you don't like light horror or gore. I guess not you then. I can only hope the studio takes more risks like this one. When original cinema wins, it really does kind of bring a warm, fuzzy feeling to my heart. Number 2, Marty Supreme. Now this movie may deserve to go to jail for false advertising. The marketers, they knew what they were doing. The entire film was sold as being a sports underdog biopic. It even fooled some of my friends who thought this was a real person when they first went into it. Not that they were so stupid that they still thought it once they got out. They knew by the time the credits rolled that it was all BS. If this movie ever happened to anyone, they would either be a national hero or the most notorious person on the planet. And Marty may deserve both those titles. Don't get me wrong, Marty, like most Sadfi Brother protagonists, is a terrible person. He's a narcissist so hypnotized by his own reflection that he believes he is predestined to greatness and will do anything and everything to make that fantasy a reality. He is an egomaniac completely in love with himself, to the point he can even, quite easily, convince others to believe in him too. This is a story about delusions of grandeur taken to the extreme. Yet the funny thing is, Marty isn't completely wrong. As many bad decisions as Marty makes, and he basically makes all of them, he is not without talent, able to sell just about anything, mostly himself, and is also able to play table tennis with skills most people would gawk at if, they didn't all dismiss it as just baby tennis. With Timothée Chalamet, they may have found the perfect narcissist. I am joking a little bit, but Chalamet, between Wonka, Paul Atreides, and now Marty, he's very much in danger of falling into typecasting. But let's give it to him here. Chalamet does play a narcissist so convincing. He rides that line of despicable and charm. He's a tightrope walker over fire. As much as I admire Benny Sadfi for breaking out of the mold with The Smashing Machine, I even more admire a formula perfected. In my mind, this movie almost feels like the perfect end to a trilogy, following both Good Times and Uncut Gems. Although I may prefer Uncut Gems, Marty Supreme has a good argument as the best of the bunch. And although you may only have one Sadfi brother behind the camera this time around, both remain directors to be reckoned with. So before we get to the final film, it's time for some runners-up. F1 was a movie I really felt leaned into that spectacle and was fun, fast, and energetic. It was completely carried by Brad Pitt's easygoing screen presence. However, it was kind of a repeat of Maverick with race cars. So yeah, that did kind of stop it from, putting it onto the list. But it didn't stop me from, being on the edge of my seat while watching. Begonia had perhaps the best dual performance of the year and nearly made the cut. This would have never worked if you didn't have two actors who could effortlessly match each other's talent. The entire thing was only slightly undercut by the ending really being telegraphed because I knew who was behind the camera. If I didn't know the director, and let's be honest, I would have figured it out in about 5 minutes, it might have been a nice surprise. But thanks to Yorgos Lanthimos, his irreverent reputation, I kind of knew which direction it was going. Then you had Blue Moon, which I thought had the best male performance of the year from Ethan Hawke. Just absolutely brilliant, and he was barely recognizable. Then, as mentioned, both Kpop and Neja were both on this list before being just barely kicked off and edged out by Zootopia 2. Stunningly beautiful films. It also hurt my soul when I had to take The Long Walk off. Just a great Stephen King film. And Warfare remains one of the best autobiographical and auteur combinations I saw last year. All of these were so close, yet so far. But with that out of the way, let's get to the fat woman singing. Number 1, Train Dreams. This was a movie that hit me emotionally like none other this year. This last year, I had my own near-death experience, and maybe that's why it connected with me, perhaps stronger than it would have otherwise. But isn't that the beautiful thing about art? It is often just as much about how an individual reaches out on a personal level to connect to it. Much of this film is about death, but is just as much about life. A meditational piece that holds on frames of rock, stream, and trees, and done with a sense of melancholic peace. It is a story about how a single life touches others, if however briefly, how people move in and out of your life, a brief passing in the grand scheme of things, whether they be the love of your life, a casual acquaintance, or even just the dude you met that night at the bar. It depicts how when those in our lives are dead or gone, they can leave the smallest of mark, or no mark at all. Yet those connections, they existed all the same. They were real, even if those experiences and connections are isolated to a single man that no one ever heard of or will ever hear from again. This is the nature of Train Dreams, a movie that looks at a logger who was born of unknown parents and left the world with no sign he ever existed at all. Yet he was here, and those experiences had value. Nothing was left behind, but something remained all the same. It is not going for big and grand. It wants to be small. That's the point. Even down to Joel Edgerton's understated performance. It's soft and quiet, just like the gorgeous cinematography. Make no mistake, I do think this is the best shot movie of the year. It is beautiful, but never in your face about it, making the most out of the 4:4 aspect ratio to capture nature's calm, its terrible retribution, and its comforting quiet emptiness. It is a movie that can be deeply sad at times, fill you with a sense of loneliness, but at the same time, leaving you feel that life, in whatever its form, is a journey worth taking despite the hardship and sorrows. And maybe it's the hardship and sorrows that make the story worth telling to begin with. This little movie was a story worth telling. Much like how the protagonist ended, it is a little film that few will watch, few will remember, and probably will pass out of time without anyone noticing. But it was here, and it had its chance, and it was worth it. It will leave you feeling something by the end. And even I can't say what that feeling is. Will it be sadness, hope, or something in between? You can come away with this film with 100 different feelings. If a core tenet of film is about feeling, then this film will give it all to you. And that's what I've got for my top 10 favorite films of the year. Did I miss any of your favorites? Are any of these picks crazy and stupid and I should be shoved into a wood chipper for suggesting them? I don't know. You tell me. I don't care, but let me know in those comments down below.
And that's all I got for this one. Sorry for this one being delayed, but I was editing it on the road and had some export issues. Next week, I will be back with a review for Project Hail Mary. So if you're new here, be sure to subscribe for that. Thank you, and keep those reels turning.